There is a specific kind of person who feels most like themselves when alone, not because they dislike people, not because something went wrong in their social development, but because solitude, for them, is not empty. It is where the thinking happens, where the processing completes, where the version of themselves that gets slowly diluted in crowds becomes, briefly, whole again. Psychology has a great deal to say about this person. Almost none of it matches what the culture says about them. The culture has two interpretations of someone who prefers solitude: shy or antisocial. Both are deficit framings. Both apply the wrong diagnosis and then stop looking. Shyness describes someone who wants connection and is afraid of it, a genuinely anxious relationship with social engagement. Preferring solitude describes something entirely different. Someone who is not afraid of connection, but who is not seeking more of it than they currently hold. These produce completely different inner lives, completely different psychological profiles, and completely different strengths. The reason the strength is hidden is that the culture put the wrong label on the behavior decades ago, and then never looked underneath it. The first thing the research establishes is a distinction that sounds simple, but dismantles nearly every cultural assumption about solitude in a single sentence. Researchers at the University of Chicago have spent decades carefully separating two experiences that ordinary language collapses into one: loneliness and chosen solitude. Loneliness is painful, distressing, and reflects a genuine gap between the social connection a person needs and what they have. Chosen solitude is something entirely different. It is contentment, alignment, the experience of a person whose social architecture genuinely matches their actual needs. You can live a largely solitary life and feel completely at peace. You can be surrounded by dozens of people at an event every week and feel profoundly, chronically alone. The UCLA Loneliness Scale captures this with unusual precision. What it measures is not the size of someone's social network. It is the quality of feeling seen, understood, and genuinely known. Those two things, network size and feeling known, turn out to correlate very weakly. Which means the assumption underlying almost every cultural critique of solitude-preferring people is simply wrong. Now consider what solitude, when genuinely chosen and genuinely aligned with need, actually produces. The first capacity it builds is one that psychology identifies as among the most functional a person can develop: emotional self-regulation. Most people regulate their emotional states co-regulatively through other people. They process difficult feelings by talking them through, by seeking reassurance, by distributing the weight of their inner experience into their social environment. This is not a weakness, but it does create dependency. The person who prefers solitude has, through long practice, developed robust internal regulation. They can sit with difficult emotions without immediately needing to discharge them socially. They can tolerate uncertainty, discomfort, and complexity without requiring another person to make it bearable. This is independence of the most functional kind, and it is not coldness. It is the accumulated result of choosing to remain present with their own inner life rather than fleeing it into noise. If this is landing, if you recognize yourself in this portrait, take a moment to like this video. It helps more people find this conversation. And if exploring the genuine psychology beneath human behavior is something you want to keep doing, subscribe. This is exactly what we do here. The second capacity is what psychologist Jennifer Campbell's research calls self-concept clarity, a stable, coherent, internally consistent sense of who one is. Most people construct their self-concept through social mirroring. They learn who they are through how others respond to them, through the feedback of groups, through the accumulated reflection of the social world. This is a valid path, but it produces a self-concept that is, to some degree, socially contingent. It depends on the mirror being present and accurate. Solitude, preferring people, have typically developed their self-concept through internal reflection rather than external feedback. They know what they value, what they believe, what they think, not because someone told them, but because they spent enough time alone to find out. When social feedback becomes unavailable, inaccurate, or hostile, they are not destabilized by it. They have an internal map that doesn't depend on the external terrain cooperating. The third capacity is one that neuroscience has begun documenting with increasing precision. Einstein observed that the monotony and solitude of a quiet life stimulates the creative mind, and modern brain imaging research explains why. When the brain is not engaged in social processing, reading faces, managing group dynamics, performing expected social scripts, navigating the constant negotiation of shared space, it becomes available for something different. The default mode network activates, a set of regions responsible for imagination, future simulation, and creative synthesis. Social processing is metabolically expensive. It occupies networks that, in solitude, return to the person. The quiet is not empty, it is generative. And the solitude, preferring person, who spends more time in this state than most, has more access to divergent thinking, the capacity to make unusual connections, explore multiple solutions, and generate ideas without the conformity pressure that groups produce by their very nature. There is also a fourth capacity that the reference literature addresses with unusual clarity, and it concerns what happens when solitude-preferring people do choose to connect. Research on large, aging cohorts, studies tracking more than 30,000 participants over time, found something that surprised even the researchers conducting them. Individuals who were socially isolated by objective measures, but who reported low perceived loneliness, were frequently functioning as well as, or better than people with extensive social networks who felt disconnected within them. What this established is not that social connection is unimportant. Chronic perceived isolation carries genuine health risks documented by the National Institute on Aging, affecting cognition, attention, and cardiovascular function over decades. What is established is that the relevant variable is alignment. Whether a person's actual social life matches what their particular psychology genuinely requires. Solitude-preferring people who are living in alignment approach connection from a fundamentally different position than people who socialize from social anxiety or from the need to fill an internal void. They approach it from sufficiency. They are not seeking to be completed by other people. They are choosing to share what is already whole. This changes the texture of every connection they form. The relationships are fewer, but they are entered deliberately, maintained through genuine mutual investment, and chosen rather than accumulated. There is a paradox here that the culture consistently misreads. These people appear less relationally engaged because they are less socially present. They are actually more relationally sophisticated because they have been thinking about relationships, reflecting on them, examining them, understanding them rather than simply collecting them. The person who attends every social event knows more people and understands fewer of them. The person who stays home with a book and two close friends understands those two people with a depth and accuracy that is genuinely unusual, and they arrive at those relationships restored. Psychologists Rachel and Stephen Kaplan's attention restoration theory established that directed attention, the kind social interaction constantly requires, depletes over time. The experience most people call exhaustion after social engagement is not metaphorical. It is the measurable depletion of a cognitive resource. Solitude restores it. The solitude-preferring person is not retreating from the world when they go quiet. They are performing maintenance. And the hidden gift they bring to every relationship they do choose to enter is that they arrive with their full attention available, not depleted, not performing, not managing a social overload they have been carrying for hours. They arrive whole. The strength of people who prefer solitude is not the strength of withdrawal. It is the strength of someone who learned, against the current of a culture that never stops talking, to listen to themselves. Who built, in the quiet, a relationship with their own mind that most people spend their entire lives outsourcing to the noise around them. They know who they are. They know what they think. They know what they value, not because someone confirmed it, but because they were alone long enough and honest enough with themselves to find out. In a world that has mistaken busyness for aliveness and crowds for connection, that is not a deficit. That is one of the rarest things there is. Do you find that solitude genuinely restores you not as an escape from people, but as a return to yourself? Leave it in the comments. More people live this quietly than the world ever seems to notice. Thank you for watching.